My name's Jason, I'm 25, and if I'm being honest, I've never been the golden child in my family. That spot has always belonged to my younger sister, Emily. She's smart, outgoing, and knows how to win people over instantly. Growing up, it was obvious she was the favorite. At family dinners, my parents bragged about her grades, her awards, her friends, while I was the quiet one in the corner who had potential, but just didn't apply himself. It stung, but I learned to live with it. I poured myself into things no one in my family cared about, like starting a small business online, teaching myself skills, and building something of my own. They didn't really ask about it, so I didn't really talk about it. That brings me to the night of Emily's graduation party. The whole extended family was crammed into this rented hall, decorated with streamers, flowers, and photos of Emily from kindergarten all the way up to her senior year of college. I'll admit, she looked happy, radiant even, and she deserved recognition for finishing strong. But the way my family handled it, well, that's what burned. I was sitting quietly at a table near the back, just trying to blend in, when my Uncle Greg, loud, opinionated, and always looking for a spotlight, raised his glass and shouted, "Finally, someone in this family worth celebrating." The room erupted in laughter. People clinked their glasses, chuckled, even nodded. My dad smirked, and my mom didn't correct him. And me? I just sat there, silent, my face burning. It wasn't even the first time Greg had taken a jab at me. He'd made comments for years about me being the quiet one who'd probably live in his mom's basement forever. But this time, surrounded by the whole family, with everyone laughing at my expense, it cut deeper than usual. I forced a smile, even laughed weakly along with the others, but inside, I was spiraling. My thoughts were a storm. Anger, humiliation, and something else, resolve. For the first time, I didn't just want to swallow it down. I wanted them to know they weren't looking at the whole picture. They saw Emily's public victories, sure, but none of them knew what I'd been quietly building, step by step, while they brushed me aside. The night dragged on with speeches, toasts, and music. Cousins danced, a slideshow played, and I sat at my table, pretending to check my phone, running through what I might do. Part of me told myself not to ruin her night. This was Emily's moment, not mine. But another part of me, the part that had been silenced and mocked for years, kept whispering, "When is it your moment, Jason? When do you get to show them you're not who they think you are?" The tension inside me only grew worse when my dad got up to speak. He cleared his throat and said, "Emily, we're so proud of you. You've accomplished more in 4 years than some people." And here he glanced right at me. Manage in a lifetime. People chuckled again. My chest tightened so hard I thought I'd snap right there. My own father. The man who knew how hard I'd been working, even if he didn't understand it. I gripped my chair so tightly my knuckles went white. And then came the final straw. Emily, sweet as she usually was, decided to take a little jab too. During her speech, she said, "Thank you all for coming to celebrate me. I know not everyone here has something to celebrate, but I'm glad you came anyway." She smirked slightly in my direction. A small dig, maybe even meant as a joke, but to me it was the culmination of years of being dismissed. The laughter that followed was the last push I needed. I stood up slowly, heart hammering in my chest, and walked toward the stage. My cousins raised their eyebrows, and a few aunts whispered to each other. The DJ, clearly confused, lowered the music. I picked up the microphone Emily had just set down. First off, I began, my voice shaking at first but growing stronger. "Congratulations, Emily. You've worked hard, and you deserve this celebration." People nodded politely, waiting for me to step aside. But I didn't. Instead, I paused, scanning the room. All those faces, many smirking, many dismissive, suddenly looked uneasy. "But since we're all here, I want to share something," I continued, steadying my breath. For years, I've sat quietly while jokes were made at my expense. I've been called a failure, the one who never measured up, the one with nothing to celebrate. And I've let you believe that. I let you laugh, let you look down on me, because I thought maybe it wasn't worth correcting you. But tonight, since we're talking about accomplishments, I think it's time you all know the truth. The room fell silent. No clinking glasses, no whispering, just the soft hum of the air conditioning and every eye locked on me. And that's when I dropped the first hint, the spark that I knew would set the whole hall on fire. I leaned closer to the microphone, lowered my voice so they had to really listen, and said, "I've been keeping something from you. Something big. And after tonight, None of you will ever look at me the same way again." The silence deepened. My Uncle Greg actually set his glass down, his smirk faltering. My mom shifted uncomfortably in her chair. Emily blinked at me, clearly caught off guard. I smiled faintly, a mix of nerves and satisfaction, and added, "You want someone in this family worth celebrating? Well, maybe you should have been paying closer attention." I could feel the weight of the silence pressing down on me as I stood there holding the microphone. My palms were damp, but my voice had steadied. I wasn't backing down this time. For years, I'd been the quiet shadow in the room, but at that moment, every pair of eyes was on me, and I wasn't going to waste it. "I've been working on something," I said, pacing slowly across the stage. "Not school, not sports, not the things you all usually clap for. While you were laughing at me, calling me the disappointment, I was building. Nights when you thought I was wasting time in my room, I was teaching myself how to run a business. Days when you assumed I was unemployed, I was actually making connections. And while you've been treating me like I had nothing going on, I've been creating something bigger than any of you realize." There were whispers now. My Aunt Linda tilted her head, clearly skeptical. Greg crossed his arms, smirking again, like he was just waiting for me to embarrass myself further. Emily shifted uncomfortably, tugging at her dress. She clearly hadn't expected her little jab to ignite this kind of storm. I kept going, my voice gaining strength with every word. "I've kept quiet because I didn't think I owed anyone here an explanation. But tonight, after hearing the same jokes, the same dismissive comments, I think it's time. Because whether you like it or not, I've outgrown being the family punchline." My dad chuckled under his breath. Not loudly, but enough that I heard it. That one sound lit me up inside. It was like he was saying, "Here goes Jason again, trying to make himself look important." I gripped the microphone tighter and looked straight at him. "You always told me I wouldn't amount to anything," I said, my tone sharper now. "That I'd never measure up to Emily. You made it a family sport to compare us. Well, here's the truth, Dad. While Emily was finishing school, and again, congrats to her, I was working behind the scenes. And as of last month, my company hit its first million in revenue." Gasps broke out across the hall. A fork clattered onto a plate. Someone muttered, "What?" My mom's hand flew to her mouth. My cousin's eyes widened like they'd just been told Santa Claus was real again. Uncle Greg, though, laughed. Not the kind of laugh that comes from amusement, but one laced with disbelief. "A million? What? Selling video games in your basement?" he sneered. A few chuckles echoed around him, but not many. The tone in the room had shifted. There was tension now. Doubt, yes, but also curiosity. I didn't flinch. I'd expected the pushback. "Not video games, Greg. An online store. Products I researched, imported, marketed, and sold. I worked every single night when everyone else was sleeping. I learned how to design, advertise, and negotiate. And now, I employ 6 people. Real jobs. Real paychecks. I have contracts lined up for next year worth more than you've probably earned in the last 5. That last line landed harder than I expected. Greg's smirk wavered, and he glanced around, as if searching for someone to back him up. No one did. The energy in the room was changing. Some faces still skeptical, but others watching me with a new kind of focus. Emily looked at me, her expression complicated. Pride? Jealousy? Maybe both. She opened her mouth like she wanted to say something, but nothing came out. I wasn't done. "You all laughed at me for years, and I let you. I let you call me the disappointment because I thought proving you wrong wasn't worth it. But now, standing here, I realize something. It's not just about me. It's about the way you treat people who don't fit your mold. The way you decide who's worthy of respect and who isn't. And I'm telling you right now, you've been wrong about me." The silence was thick, almost suffocating. My heart pounded, but instead of shame, I felt a rush of clarity. Then my dad stood up. Slowly, deliberately. His face was unreadable, which somehow made it worse. He adjusted his tie, cleared his throat, and said, "Jason, if this is true, then why haven't we heard about it before? Why keep it a secret unless you're making it up?" There it was. The challenge. The same doubt he'd cast over me since I was a teenager. And I knew this was the moment everything could turn. I met his gaze, steady and unblinking. "Because I didn't think you deserved to know," I said quietly. The room gasped again. My mother whispered my name, horrified. Emily covered her mouth. Greg muttered something under his breath. And before anyone could respond, I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out an envelope I had debated bringing all night. Inside were copies of the business articles that had just been published about my company, complete with photos of me, the logo, the revenue figures. I'd printed them out not because I planned to use them, but as a reminder to myself of how far I'd come. I held the envelope up. But since you're all so quick to laugh, maybe it's time you see the proof. I walked toward the center of the hall, the envelope in my hand, the entire family watching me with wide eyes. My father's face had gone pale, my uncle's smirk was gone, and Emily looked like she didn't know whether to hug me or cry. I stopped in the middle of the room, about to open the envelope and show everyone exactly what I'd been hiding. The tension was electric. Some people leaned forward, others whispered, and I could feel the weight of every ounce of doubt and ridicule I'd carried my whole life about to explode. And just as I started to pull the papers free, someone's voice rang out from the back of the hall. "Jason, wait." The entire room turned toward the voice. It was my grandfather's voice. Strong, clear, cutting through the noise like a bell. Everyone turned in unison toward the back of the hall, where he was slowly rising from his chair. My grandfather, Robert, wasn't the type to involve himself in family squabbles. He was a retired engineer, quiet, observant, always the one who sat silently at gatherings and only spoke when something truly mattered. Which is why the moment he stood up, the entire hall seemed to hold its breath. "Jason," he said again, his eyes fixed on me. "Before you show those papers, I need to say something." The envelope trembled slightly in my hand. My chest tightened. My grandfather never interrupted anyone, especially not at an event like this. Part of me wanted to wave him off, to finally claim my moment without interference. But another part of me knew his words carried weight in this family. When Robert spoke, people listened. I lowered the envelope just a little, still clutching it. "What is it, Grandpa?" My voice was steady, but inside I was tense. He walked slowly toward me, the shuffle of his shoes on the polished floor echoing in the silence. The room felt frozen in time. Cousins leaning forward, Emily biting her lip, my Uncle Greg with his arms still crossed, though his expression had slipped into unease. My father shifted impatiently, clearly not wanting the spotlight to drift away from his line of questioning. Grandpa stopped a few feet from me, his hand resting lightly on the back of a chair. He studied me for a long moment before turning his gaze to the rest of the family. "All of you," he began, his voice calm but firm, "have made Jason into your target for years. I've sat back, listened to your little jokes, your comparisons, your so-called harmless teasing. And I've watched this boy, this man, say nothing. Do you think that means he was weak? That he was failing? No, he was building." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. My mom's hand fell from her mouth. Emily's eyes widened. Grandpa straightened, his voice growing stronger. I knew what Jason was working on. He came to me 3 years ago when he was first starting. He asked me for advice, not money, not handouts, advice. He showed me his plans, his spreadsheets, his vision. And I told him then what I'll tell you now. It was brilliant. The hall erupted into hushed whispers. I felt my heart hammer in my chest as Grandpa continued. Jason didn't keep it a secret because he was ashamed. He kept it a secret because he knew most of you would do exactly what you've always done. Mock him, belittle him, dismiss him. And I agreed with him. Better to let his work speak for itself. And now, he said, gesturing toward the envelope in my hand, it's ready to do just that. The room was silent again, but the energy had changed completely. My Uncle Greg looked visibly uncomfortable, his smugness slipping into something more like defensiveness. My father's face was tight, his jaw clenched. My mother was fidgeting with her necklace, clearly overwhelmed. And me? My throat tightened, not from nerves this time, but from something closer to relief. For years I'd carried this alone. Now, with my grandfather standing there, I felt like the weight had shifted. It wasn't just me against the room anymore. I opened my mouth to speak, but my dad cut in, his voice sharper than before. "Dad, this is ridiculous. You're taking Jason's side without proof. Anyone can make claims. A business, $1 million. Where's the evidence?" He looked at me, his eyes narrowing. "Go on, Jason. Show us this proof. Let's see if it's real." The challenge hung heavy in the air. My fingers tightened on the envelope. This was it. The moment everything could collapse or finally snap into place. I slowly pulled out the papers, the glossy print of the magazine article catching the light. Headlines with my company's name, photos of me standing beside shelves of products, charts showing growth. Gasps and murmurs swept through the hall as I held them up. But before I could pass them around, Greg suddenly barked. So what if he got lucky one year? Businesses fail all the time. Let's not pretend this makes him some kind of hero. Emily earned her degree the right way. That's something no one can take from her. All eyes flicked back to me. The skepticism was creeping back in, clawing its way into the room. Greg's voice had always carried influence, and I knew if I didn't handle this carefully, the tide could turn again. I looked at him calmly, then at the rest of the family, and said, "It's not luck, and it's not just one year. What I've built isn't just about money. It's about proving that I wasn't the failure you all made me out to be. And if you want more proof than this, I have plenty." I slid another sheet out of the envelope. This one wasn't a magazine article. It was something else entirely. Something even I hadn't been sure I'd show tonight. The hall leaned in closer, straining to see what it was. And just as I lifted it into view, Emily suddenly stepped forward and grabbed my wrist. "Jason, stop," she whispered urgently, her voice trembling. The entire hall froze. My sister, who'd always been the golden child, who'd let the jokes about me slide, who'd even joined in herself, was suddenly standing beside me, her hand on my arm, her face pale. "Don't show them that," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I stared at her, stunned. The family began buzzing again, the whispers growing louder, the tension breaking into confusion. My dad's eyes narrowed. My uncle leaned forward. My mom looked between us like she'd seen a ghost. And in that moment, I realized something. Emily knew exactly what I was about to reveal. I looked down at Emily's hand clutching my wrist. Her fingers were trembling, and her usually confident expression was cracked with panic. It was the first time in years I'd seen her unsettled, the first time she didn't look like the untouchable golden child. The whispers around us grew louder, overlapping like a rising tide. People were leaning in, craning their necks to catch every flicker of movement. My dad was glaring. Greg was shifting in his seat with an annoyed scowl, and my mom just looked bewildered. "Jason," Emily whispered again, but louder this time. "Please, don't show them." The hairs on the back of my neck stood on end. My stomach knotted. Why would she say that unless she knew exactly what I had in my hand? And more importantly, why was she so desperate to stop me? I pulled my wrist gently but firmly from her grasp, my eyes never leaving hers. "Emily," I said, my voice low but carrying through the silent room, "why are you so afraid of what's in here?" Her lips parted, but no words came out. Her face flushed red, and she looked at the floor. That was all the confirmation I needed. I turned back to the crowd and held up the second document. It wasn't another article or growth chart. It was a contract, a signed partnership agreement between my company and a major corporation, one that everyone in the room would recognize. Their logo was splashed across the top in bold blue letters. It wasn't just some little business milestone. It was a deal that placed me firmly on the map. Gasps rippled through the hall. My uncle's smug expression collapsed into disbelief. My mother clutched her necklace tighter. My father blinked rapidly, his jaw clenching. And Emily, my sister who had just been the star of the night, looked like she might faint. I took a deep breath. "This," I said, holding the contract high, "is proof that what I've built isn't just luck or temporary success. It's recognition from a company all of you know, with a deal that guarantees millions in revenue over the next few years." I wasn't going to show this tonight. I didn't want to overshadow Emily's graduation. But since you've spent the entire evening laughing at me, mocking me, and treating me like I don't belong, I think it's time you all understand that I am not the failure you've made me out to be. The room erupted in a cacophony of voices. Some people gasped in admiration, others whispered frantically to their neighbors, and a few clapped hesitantly. My uncle Greg muttered, "This can't be real," but his voice lacked conviction. My father stayed seated, his face hard, but his silence spoke louder than anything. I turned back to Emily. "You knew about this, didn't you?" I asked, my tone sharp. Her eyes filled with tears, and she nodded faintly. The room went dead silent again. "Explain," I demanded. She swallowed hard, her voice breaking as she spoke. I found out a few weeks ago. I overheard Mom talking about it with Grandpa. I didn't tell anyone because," she glanced nervously at the crowd, then back at me, "because I was afraid you'd take this moment away from me." The words hit me like a blow, but they made sense. My own sister, who had always basked in the spotlight, had known the truth about my success and said nothing. Worse, she'd still taken a shot at me in her speech, fully aware of what I'd achieved. I shook my head slowly. You let them laugh at me, even knowing the truth? You let Dad keep mocking me, knowing I'd already accomplished more than he ever dreamed? And then you had the nerve to stand here and take another jab at me in front of everyone. Emily's tears spilled over, and she whispered, I didn't mean it like that. But the damage was done. I turned back to the family, my chest burning with a mixture of anger and triumph. You all wanted someone in this family worth celebrating? You've been looking in the wrong direction. While you were worshiping degrees and dismissing me, I was building a future. And now, that future is here. I don't need your approval. I don't need your applause. But I won't sit in silence while you treat me like I'm nothing. For the first time in my life, the room was mine. Every eye was on me, not in pity or mockery, but in stunned silence. The tables had turned completely. And then, my grandfather stepped forward again, placing a hand gently on my shoulder. Jason, he said softly, but loud enough for all to hear. You've done what no one else here had the courage to do. You believed in yourself when no one else would. That is worth more than any degree or toast. Tonight, they should be raising their glasses to you too. The words landed like a hammer. A few relatives actually began clapping, hesitant at first, then stronger. My cousins started nodding, their faces lighting up with admiration. My mom looked conflicted, caught between pride and guilt. My dad, however, stayed frozen, his face tight with suppressed anger. Uncle Greg scoffed loudly, standing up. All right, enough. He's just trying to steal the spotlight. This is Emily's night, not his. But this time, no one laughed with him. No one nodded. His words fell flat. I looked him square in the eye and said, I didn't steal anything. I earned it. The only thing I'm taking tonight is my voice back. The room applauded again, louder this time. Greg sat down, his face red. My father looked like he wanted to argue, but he knew he'd lost the crowd. Emily just stood there, tears streaking her face, caught between shame and something that looked like regret. I lowered the microphone slowly, the adrenaline still coursing through me. For the first time in years, I felt lighter. Not because I'd finally proven them wrong, but because I'd finally spoken my truth. As I stepped off the stage, my grandfather squeezed my shoulder again and whispered, I'm proud of you, son. I smiled faintly, my chest swelling with something I'd craved for years. Not approval from the whole family, but acknowledgement from someone who had always mattered most. The rest of the night carried on awkwardly. Emily's celebration didn't vanish, but the mood had changed. Conversations shifted, glances followed me, and the air was heavy with unspoken apologies. My dad avoided me, my uncle sulked, and my mother hovered, clearly torn. But none of it mattered anymore. I had taken back my place in this family, not as the failure in the corner, but as someone worth listening to. And as I left the hall later that night, contract still tucked under my arm, I realized something important. Their respect, their laughter, their opinions, they didn't define me anymore. They never had. The only thing that defined me was what I had built with my own two hands. And for the first time in my life, I knew they all finally understood that. That was the night the joke stopped. That was the night I stopped being their punchline. That was the night I became someone worth celebrating.